In this video, we're going over the best spells that can deal poison damage, which is only 10 spells, funnily enough. Starting us off at number 10, we have Poison Spray. This is a cantrip that has a range of 10 feet and deals 1d12 poison damage, which is the highest damage die of any of the cantrips in the game, save the second effect of Toll the Dead. And as with all damaging cantrips, the damage die is increased by 1d12 at level 5, 11, and 17, up to a respectable 4d12. However, the reason this spell only takes number 10 spot on this list is because it requires the creature to succeed a Constitution saving throw, which is the worst stat to target, as most creatures have high Constitution modifiers to begin with. Also, just like other cantrips, if the creature succeeds their saving throw, they take no damage instead of only taking half damage, unless you're an evocation wizard with the potent cantrip class feature. And on top of that, Poison Spray only has a range of 10 feet, which is not a favorable range for most spellcasters. Spells like Toll the Dead, which only deals 1d8 necrotic damage on an undamaged target but 1d12 on a damaged one, requires a wisdom save and has a range of 60 feet, making it far superior. And that's before you calculate the fact that poison damage is by far the worst damage type in the game. And if you want to learn more about that, check out our video on the top 10 damage types. All in all, this cantrip looks great on paper with its high damage potential, but combined with its poor damage type, the fact that it targets Constitution, and that you practically have to be in melee range to cast it, you're better off using something like Toll the Dead, Firebolt, or even Eldritch Blast if you're a Warlock and you want to use a damaging cantrip, since the range alone makes these cantrips far more useful and safe. Poison Spray basically embodies the worst of all the spells on this list, which is why it's firmly at the bottom spot. Firing in at number 9, we have Ray of Sickness. This is a first level spell with a range of 60 feet that requires a ranged spell attack roll and deals 2d8 poison damage on hit. The target then makes a Constitution saving throw in order to not be affected by the poison condition until the end of the next turn. This gives the creature disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks, which can be pretty rough both in and out of combat. This spell might not do as much damage as Poison Spray can at higher levels, but it does have the range to compensate as well as additional effects that it has. Having early access to conditions that impose disadvantage on enemy attacks for one round is actually not a half bad thing to have, since Ray of Sickness also does respectable damage compared to other spells that inflict conditions such as Earth Tremor, which only deals 1d6 damage but inflicts the prone condition. It's just that Ray of Sickness also has the unfortunate downside of first needing to hit its target in order to impose a Constitution saving throw, so that you can maybe poison something for one round, while also hoping the creature you're fighting against isn't immune to being poisoned. There were almost 550 creatures who are immune to poison damage, and immunity to damage type goes hand in hand with immunity to the condition. However, if all of these conditions are met, congratulations, you've successfully poisoned a creature for one whole round. Fortunately, this spell does have some situational and niche uses. At higher levels, many creatures usually have access to strong multi-attack options, such as dragons. So if you find yourself in a situation where you might not want to expend all your resources, Ray of Sickness might be a decent low-cost solution to impose disadvantage, since the only other spell in the entire game that is able to directly inflict a poison condition is Contagion, which is a 5th level spell. So while interesting and cheap due to the pretty niche usage of this spell, it only takes number 9 spot on this list. And at number 8, we have Chaos Bolt, a first level sorcerer spell with a range of 120 feet that deals 2d8 plus 1d6 damage on hit. You then get to choose a damage type from a table based on what you rolled on those 2d8s. The potential damage types include Acid, Cold, Fire, Force, Lightning, Poison, Psychic, and Thunder. The spell also has an additional effect where if you roll the same number for both of the d8s, the spell then leads onto a new target within 30 feet of your original target as long as there is a valid target in range. The spell can only target a creature once per cast, so it can't just jump back and forth between two creatures forever. However, if you get very lucky, this spell does technically have the capacity for near infinite range and damage, as you can just keep hitting a new target within 30 feet of the previous one. But that is very impractical and unrealistic. What's unique about this spell is that there are a plethora of different damage types that it can deal, including poison damage, but most notably force damage, which is the least resisted damage in the game. But you also have cold damage, which is the most resisted, and of course poison damage, which is one of the most common damage immunities. The overall damage on this spell also cannot be understated, as 2d8 plus 1d6 for a first level spell is actually pretty good, before you factor in the leaping effect whenever you roll doubles on the d8s. With its wild nature, it pairs up nicely with classes or characters that want a more chaotic or wild feel to them, such as the Wild Magic Sorcerer subclass. But the reason this spell only takes number 8 spot on this list also happens to be the same reason that makes this spell great: its potential. While being able to deal different damage types might sound good, the fact that it's entirely random and dependent on the damage roll means that you might end up rolling a damage type that would be unfavorable for any given combat. For instance, rolling 2s and 3s against the Crackler, a creature that resists both cold and fire damage, means you're doing next to nothing to it. And since you can only target a new creature when rolling doubles in the d8s, relying on this spell against multiple creatures is really only a nice bonus, as spells like Burning Hands would technically work better since it hits every creature in a cone for 3d6 fire damage, albeit at the cost of a range and only a failed dexterity saving throw. This spell can only be learned by sorcerers or through taking a single background from Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, so you would think there would be some good synergy with their meta magic, but outside of empowered spells, there really isn't, and that is usually too costly to make it worthwhile, as there are better first level options you could use instead, such as the next spot on our list. And at number 7, we have Chromatic Orb, a first level spell that's available to sorcerers and wizards. It has a range of 90 feet and requires a ranged spell attack roll in order to hurl a sphere at a creature, dealing 3d8 damage of a type that you choose between acid, cold, fire, lightning, thunder, and poison. The nice thing about this spell is that, like Chaos Bolt, it provides a wide array of potential damage types, though not psychic or force. However, unlike Chaos Bolt, you get to choose what kind of damage you want to deal with it, rather than rolling and choosing one based on the damage dice. This additional damage is barely an increase over the 3d8 plus 1d6 of Chaos Bolt, as it deals 3d8, but is still worth noting. So at the cost of 30 foot of range and 2 potential damage types, you get slightly higher and more reliable damage. Since this spell is also available to wizards, one thing you can do is learn Chromatic Orb as an Order of Scribes wizard, since at level 2 they gain the Awakened Spellbook feature, where its second effect allows you to change the damage type of any wizard spell you cast with the damage type of another spell at the same level. For example, if you were to cast Burning Hands at first level, while also knowing Chromatic Orb, you could change the damage of Burning Hands from fire to poison, since poison is listed in Chromatic Orb's spell description. However, this would only work for first level spells since Chromatic Orb is a first level spell. So if you wanted your Fireball to deal poison damage, you would first need to upcast it to 5th level while knowing Cloudkill, since there are no 3rd or 4th level spells that deal poison damage. All in all, Chromatic Orb basically does what Chaos Bolt does while also having some niche versatility options, but most importantly is it just being more reliable. And at number 6, we have Dragon's Breath. This is a 2nd level concentration spell which lasts for 1 minute, where, as a bonus action, you touch one willing creature, and until the spell ends, the creature can exhale an energy in a 15-foot cone as an action. Creatures in this cone make a dexterity saving throw, or take 3d6 damage, half as much damage on a success. Like Chromatic Orb, you get to choose the damage type for the spell when you first apply it to the creature, and you have to choose between acid, cold, fire, lightning, and poison. This is just an overall solid AoE damage spell. It essentially gives one creature Burning Hands that they can use for a whole minute. However, there are some downsides to this spell which keeps it from being higher on this list. For one, it uses your concentration, meaning you can't use other concentration spells such as Hold Person or Web, 2 excellent crowd control spells at this level. It also requires the creature's action in order to actually use the breath attack, which they might not use if they already have another action they might want to take. However, if you wanted your fighter to deal more reliable AoE damage, Dragon's Breath is a decent early game option. So while decent, it still only takes number 6 spot on this list. Next up at number 5, we have Infestation. This is a cantrip with a range of 30 feet that requires a target to make a Constitution saving throw, or take 1d6 poison damage and then be displaced 5 feet in a random direction, dictated by a d4 roll. This is a very simple cantrip that has a lot of versatility and can lead to some very funny situations. For example, if you're in combat against someone that's riding on horseback, you can use this on their horse in order to unwillingly move it, which would impose a DC 10 dexterity save against the rider or they fall prone within 5 feet of their mount, as per the rules on mounting and dismounting. Alternatively, nothing in the rules says you can't also target the rider, so you could use Infestation to force the rider off of their own horse that way. However, there aren't any rules for targeting riders with effects that cause unwilling movement, so check your DM before you try to pull that move. Another way you can use Infestation is simply using this spell on creatures near cliffs to make them potentially fall to their deaths. Although my favorite use of Infestation is combining it with party members that know Spike Growth, a 2nd level spell available to druids and rangers which creates difficult terrain in a 20-foot radius, and creatures inside of it take 2d4 piercing damage for every 5 feet they travel. And since Infestation moves the target 5 feet, if a creature inside of Spike Growth fails their Constitution save against your Infestation, they'll be forced to take both the damage of Infestation and an additional 2d4 piercing damage from Spike Growth. And since druids can also learn Infestation, this can help them capitalize on the damage of Spike Growth too. All in all, Infestation doesn't do a lot of damage, but it can enable some very clever plays when used in the right situations, which is why it deserves a spot on this list. And at number 4, we have Cloudkill. As we talked about earlier, Cloudkill is a 5th level spell, requires concentration, has a range of 120 feet. It creates a 20-foot radius sphere of poisonous gas that deals 5d8 poison damage on a failed Constitution save to any creature that enters the area for the first time on its turn or starts its turn inside the area, dealing half damage on a successful save. The fog also heavily obscures the area and moves 10 feet away from you at the start of each of your turns, and will always sink to the lowest level of land, even pouring through holes. Aside from the poison damage it deals, it works basically like the darkness spell in that it heavily obscures the area you cast it at. Whenever an area is heavily obscured, it essentially blinds anyone that is inside the area. A blinded creature automatically fails any ability check that relies on sight, and attack rolls made against the creature have advantage while their attack rolls have disadvantage. However, since you also can't see the creature inside the obscured area, attacks made against them have disadvantage, and they gain advantage on their attacks by being unseen. This means that you can use Cloudkill in order to effectively normalize part of the battlefield by forcing attacks made by and against creatures in its area to have both advantage and disadvantage, which cancel each other out, since advantage and disadvantage from multiple sources do not stack. This is in addition to the area denial due to the fact that Cloudkill encourages enemies to move out of it so as to avoid the poison damage. The cloud does travel every turn, but only away from the caster, so maintaining the spell's position might be a bit awkward to pull off, so be mindful of where you position the spell. One neat thing you can do with this spell, however, is obtain the magical item Periaptive Proof Against Poison, which grants immunity to both the poison condition and poison damage, and just comfortably sit in your own Cloudkill while your opponent takes poison damage and struggles to hit you. Later on, you might even be able to take advantage of the legendary Green Dragon Mask that allows you to turn your poison immunity into health restoration, so that you can just heal off of your own Cloudkill using it as cover from your enemies as you whittle them down. The reason why this spell takes number 4 spot on this list over the previous entries is because even if the poison damage is resisted or immune, it still heavily obscures an area, which can still have some uses during combat, unlike most of the other spells in this list which don't. And at number 3, we have Prismatic Spray. This is a 7th level spell that produces a 60-foot cone in front of the caster. Each creature inside the cone makes a dexterity saving throw, and you roll a d8 for each creature to determine what effect takes place. Rolling a 1 to 5 results in 10d6 damage of a specific type of damage, half as much damage as a successful save, which is determined by the number shown on the dice. Starting at 1, it deals fire, acid, lightning, poison, and at 5, cold damage. A 6 restrains a target on a failed save, and the creature must then make a Constitution saving throw at the end of each of its turns until it either succeeds or fails 3 rolls total, where if they succeed, the restraint ends, and if they fail, they get petrified. Rolling a 7 will blind the targets on a failed save, which forces a wisdom saving throw at the start of each of the creature's next turns. On a successful, the blind ends, where on a failure, the creature is transported to another plane of existence determined by your DM and is no longer blinded. Rolling an 8 strikes the target with 2 rays, allowing you to roll twice more with re-rolling any other 8s, meaning that a target can never be hit by more than 2 rays from a single cast. And as you can see, there is a lot going on with this spell. And, just like Chaos Bolt, this spell's damage and effects are random. However, unlike Chaos Bolt, this spell also includes some very powerful forms of crowd control in the forms of the Restrain, Blind, and Petrified conditions, as well as the Banishment itself, which is a 4th level spell, with the potential to do 20d6 damage instead of 10d6, or 10d6 plus an additional harmful status debuff. This basically makes it one of the highest damaging dealing 7th level spells in the game. The reason this spell is only at the number 3 spot, however, is because each time you reach a high enough level to learn it, you'll also have access to much better spells like Force Cage, Teleport, and even Simulacrum. And even if you're looking for pure damage, you'll deal more by just upcasting Fireball at 7th level, since its 12d6 damage is higher than a single hit from Prismatic Spray, unless you happen to roll an 8 for the potential 20d6 damage. Prismatic Spray also suffers from the same problem Chaos Bolt does, in that you might roll a damage type that the creatures either resist or is immune to, which is never fun. And at number 2, we have the spell Illusory Dragon. This is an 8th level spell which requires concentration, has a range of 120 feet, and what it does is create a huge-sized shadowy dragon in an unoccupied space that you can see within range. Any enemies that see it must succeed a wisdom saving throw or be frightened. This save can be repeated only if they get out of line of sight of the dragon. And as a bonus action on your turn, you can move the illusion up to 60 feet and have it exile a breath attack in a 60-foot cone that deals your choice of acid, cold, lightning, fire, necrotic, or poison damage, depending on the damage type chosen when you create the dragon. Creatures inside the cone must make an intelligence saving throw or take 7d6 of the chosen damage type, or half as much on a success. The dragon can't be hit, damaged, or inflicted with conditions in any way, and succeeds all saving throws. To figure out that the dragon is an illusion, a creature can use their action in order to make an investigation check against the spell save DC in order to gain advantage against saves against the breath attack. What makes this spell really great is the fact that it induces the Frighten condition, which gives the target disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls while the source of fear is within line of sight, It makes it so the creature can't willingly move closer to the source of its fear. There aren't very many creatures that are immune to the frightened condition, so this condition is actually pretty good even at higher levels. On top of that, the save for its breath attack is intelligence, which is the best saving throw to target, meaning you will, more often than not, inflict full damage each time you use it. Not to mention the breath attack uses your bonus action rather than your action, which means you can still cast other spells on your turn like Fireball, Cone of Cold, or maybe even Rhyme's Binding Ice, which reduces creatures' speeds to 0 so they can't attempt to move out of the line of sight of the dragon. And even if they do manage to move out of line of sight, the dragon can be moved up to 60 feet each round, allowing the frightened condition to persist if the affected creatures don't outrun the dragon. The only reason this spell is not at the number 1 spot on this list is because the top spell is objectively better in every regard. And finally, the number 1 spell that can deal poison damage is Prismatic Wall. This is a 9th level spell that lasts 10 minutes, has a range of 60 feet, and does not require concentration. It creates a wall that is 90 feet long, 30 feet high, and 1 inch thick, centered on a point you can see within range. The wall cannot be positioned through a space occupied by a creature or else the spell fails, so your action and spell slot are both wasted. The wall sheds bright light up to 100 feet and dim light for an additional 100 feet, and you can designate creatures you want to pass through the wall or remain near it without harm. And if a non-designated creature moves within 20 feet or starts its turn there, they're blinded for 1 minute if they don't succeed a Constitution save. There are 7 layers of this wall that all have different requirements to break, but you can only break them one at a time and only in order from red to violet. If a creature attempts to reach into or pass through the wall, they make dexterity saving throws or are affected by a ton of effects dictated by however many layers they attempt to pass through. The red, orange, yellow, green, and blue layers all deal 10d6 damage of all the typical elemental types, or half as much on a successful dexterity save. The indigo and violet layers share the effects of Prismatic Spray, where indigo restrains and petrifies if the creature fails 3 constitution saves, and violet blinds them and transports them to another plane, removing blindness on a successful wisdom save. As long as the red, orange, and indigo layers are active, ranged attacks and spells cannot pass through the wall. And the conditions on breaking each layer range from dealing a certain type of damage to the layer, as with the red, blue, and yellow layers, or casting certain spells and effects, as with the orange, green, indigo, and violet layers. You can sort of look at the spell as a sort of big boss obstacle that is meant to take an enormous amount of effort in order to get through. The nice thing about this spell is the fact that as a player, you can effectively shut down whole encounters or even just cut a battlefield in 2, forcing a split in enemy ranks or even cutting off potential reinforcements, as anything that passes through the wall will have to make not 1 saving throw, but 7 of them. The wording on this spell is by far the most confusing on this list for multiple reasons. For example, the spell description says that when a creature attempts to pass through the wall, it does so 1 layer at a time. But this is only there to tell the player how the spell resolves its damage and effects, so you don't roll all 7 saves at once since it would be a total mess that way. The description for the indigo layer also says that if a creature successfully saves 3 times, the spell ends rather than just the restraint. However, this seems to be an oversight as Prismatic Spray also says that the spell ends if the creature successfully saves all 3 times, which isn't possible in spells that are instantaneous. And finally, the description mentions that a creature has to attempt to reach through or pass through the wall in order to make the saving throws of the layer effects, which implies that unwilling movements such as shoving or telekinesis can be used to cheese through the wall without making any of the saves, which would defeat the whole point of the spell. There is a sage advice by Dan Dillon which reads, "Prismatic Wall is a giant jerk. It doesn't care if you meant to try and push through or not, it's still going to zap you." And if you can't kick someone through Prismatic Wall and watch them shred into rainbow confetti, then what even is the point of it all? So it certainly seems like this cheese was not intended, but if you have a group that very strictly adheres to rules as written, you might be able to get away with it. This takes the top spot on this list as it deals a ton of damage in addition to doing the same stuff with Prismatic Spray, but better. It also possesses much better crowd control than Cloudkill, and while you can't choose to do poison damage, the poison damage is included whenever a creature tries to pass through the wall. It's a nightmare to deal with since it can't simply be dispelled, except for the violet layer, and it can't be affected by anti-magic fields. On a final note, Order of Scribes Wizards can take the poison damage of the spell and apply it to Meteor Swarm in order to make the actual best poison damage spell in the game. But as only a single subclass can do that, and it doesn't technically deal poison damage itself, we can't make that the actual top spot of this list. Alright, and there you have it, the 10 spells that deal poison damage. It's a shame how little attention poison damage gets in the game, but it is understandable as poison damage is the least useful damage type by far. We talked about this in our top 10 damage types video, but there are more creatures immune to poison damage than all other damage types combined, as long as you remove cold damage from the equation. So, do you have any ideas for future videos just like this one? If so, we'd love to hear about those things down in the comments.